Heimstatt von Geist und Mimes. Vilne jiddischlach vertracht, wo es morgen stille Twilles, stille Säudes von der Nacht. Oftmals seh ich dich in Cholem, Herrs geliebte Vilne mein, und die alte Vilne Ghetto in a neppeldicken Schein. Vilne, Vilne, unser Heimstatt, unser Bänkschaft und Bagger. Ach, wie oft es ruft dein Namen von man oiga Reusatrer. Vilne Geslach, Vilne Teichen, Vilne Wälder, Berg und Tal. Etwas Neues, etwas bängt sich noch die Zeiten von einmal. Ich seh dem Wäldele Sakreter in sein Schotten eingehielt, wo geheim es haben Lehrer unser Wissen Durst gestillt. Vilne hat dem ersten vor dem Freiheitsfond gewählt. Und die liebe Kinder ihre it hat seinen Geist belebt. Vilne, Vilne, unser Heimstatt, unser Bänkschaft und Bagger. Ach, wie oft es ruft dein Namen von man oig Aroisatrer. Vilne Geslach, Vilne Teichen, Vilne Wälder, Berg und Tal. Etwas Neues, etwas bängt sich noch die Zeiten von einmal. Vilne Geslach, Vilne Teichen, Vilne Wälder, Berg und Tal. Etwas Neues, etwas bängt sich noch die Zeiten von
Shalom Aleichem. Heute sei Bruchim Haboim. Wie viel von euch können wir gut verstehen auf Jiddisch, dass ihr so gut hebt die Hand? Und wie viel von euch so mich verstehen Jiddisch? Ich sehe nicht keine Hand. Ich heiße Elle Palewski. Reichis darf ich sagen, als begriffen euch Namen von Jevo wird da gestanden der Direktor von öffentlichen Programmen, Alex Weiser. I should explain that greetings in the name of the Yevo would normally be given by Alex Weiser, the Director of Public Program. Alex just became a father. We'll say it in a moment together. Not just became a father. The mother is the archivist, Stephanie, of Yivo, Stephanie Halpern. So this is a Yivo co-production. And sie seien molle Simche, nicht ähnlich Scheier wie eine Sappe. So, lassen wir zusammen, Alexen und Stephanie, abgeben nach herzigen Mazel Tov, zusammen 1, 2, 3, Mazel Tov. Okay. Ich heiße Elle Palewski, ich bin ein Kind von Vilne, zwischen die Gründer von Nusakh Vilne, gewesene Partisaner in Vilne und in sehr Schuss für ein Vorsitz. So, I'm Elle, I'm a child of Vilna who helped create the organization Nusakh Vilna, which is co-sponsoring with the Yivo, but in name now because it's a Yivo production, who were partisans in Vilna, and actually and interestingly were together in the same group as the poet and folklorist Shmerke Kaczerginski, who will be the topic of today's talk. I also want to, we mentioned a Simcha, I want to mention a Shtikele Troya. Just recently, last week, we also lost the last living partisan of that division. She was in Rudnitsky, Shmerke, and my folks were in Naroch. But this is Fania Bransovsky. Fania left us at the age of 102. Fania was an extraordinary person. Not only was she a partisan, but after surviving the war, she dedicated her life in Vilna to the preservation of Yiddish and Yiddish culture and Yiddish language. She was the heart and soul of the Yiddish Institute at the University of Vilna. I had the pleasure and honor to work with her there when I was director of their summer program, once I had retired from my paying job. Fania and my mother used to exchange birthday gifts. They were the same age exactly. I lost my mother 4 years ago. And I had the Vergnügen, the pleasure of bringing her the gifts in person. But I can tell you that Fania was a yotzim min haklal, a true exception. She was at the heart of the program. She knew where everything was. She was the resource center. And Millie, she was also the camp mother for the younger students. So for a second, we'll just pause and honor the memory of Fania Bransovsky. Thank you. When I was a kid, and people would say, how did the Jews let themselves be led to the slaughter? Clearly, I was offended, but I was a kid. I knew my parents were partisans, and I answered, what do you mean they let themselves be led to the slaughter? They resisted, they fought back, they did this. There was the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. There was the Vilna partisans there. Even in Sobibor, there were. It took a while, my young teens, to realize that perhaps the harder form of resistance was in maintaining humanity in the ghettos and camps, was in retaining faith, be'emuno shlema, in the face of unbelievable, gruesome behavior, of teaching children, of running soup kitchens. You know what the biggest celebration in the Vilna ghetto was? When the library had given out its 1,000th book. Imagine that. And so Nusakh Vilna, the organization that decided we'll have an annual gathering, at first memorializing, and very quickly it became a lecture and a concert, so that the spirit of Vilna would infuse itself into the ongoing life in America. And that's what we're doing now. I then learned that in today's world, resistance isn't just fighting back. It isn't just maintaining humanity and spiritual resistance. It's also just standing fast in presenting the facts. Because facts now are at risk. And shared knowledge now is at risk. And insisting upon fact and shared knowledge is also a form of resistance today, and one that we are all part of. Which leads me to introduction of our speaker, our keynote speaker. Our keynote speaker is Bret Werb. He tells me that it comes from the same word as willow in Polish and Yiddish, Werbe. Bret is the chief sound archivist and musicologist at the US Holocaust Memorial Museum. He has written scholarly pieces and articles and has been a resource to the field of Holocaust study. He is, however, also an active collector. We were just talking that in the Soviet Union, they had begun collections of Jewish creativity during the Holben years, the Holocaust years, never been organized, never been published. They're working on it so the facts would be known. In the Soviet Union, there wasn't a Holben, there wasn't a Holocaust, there was the Great Patriotic War. Bret got his PhD at the UCLA, and as it turns out, the topic of his dissertation was Shmerke Kaczerginski, and he'll share with us that knowledge. I can tell you, my folks knew Shmerke. I didn't. He died tragically after having survived the Holben. But I can tell you that he would be very tickled, from what I understand, to know that people wrote dissertations about him. So it is mein Covid und mein Vergnügen, euch vorzustellen, Dr. Werb, und wird für uns halten, ein Stückele Drosche. Bret?
Thank you. I hope I can live up to the Vergnügen part of that wonderful intro. And thank you for coming out in the drizzle. And thank you, Alex and Stephanie Mazel Tov again. You can have another one from me. Julie up there in the booth, Ellie. It's a real honor to have been asked to participate in this series, in this very rich, legacy-rich institution. I found at my parents' house my original YIVO card from the early 1980s or late 1970s. My first time out there, the mansion on Fifth Avenue. Anyway, that was before I came to work at the Holocaust Memorial Museum, and that work in Washington, D.C. involves researching and identifying sources for what we've come to call a Shoah song. I look in archives, libraries, and private collections. I leaf through old books, magazines, and newspapers. I scroll through microfilmed and scanned documents. I seek out sound recordings and survivor interviews. And now and then I personally interviewed people who can recall a song or might have a musical tale to tell. Taken together, all these documents, publications, recordings, and testimonies preserve a significant body of folklore and literature. Indeed, considering that the Shoah brought to a close the 1,000-year history of Yiddish as the first language of millions, the creative writings of the period, of course including songs, constitute the last great phase of Yiddish artistic expression on its native European soil. And of this array of resources, one book, the anthology Songs of the Ghettos and Camps, in Yiddish, Lieder von den Ghettos and Lagern, published in New York in 1948, remains the single indispensable guide and point of reference for research in the field of Jewish folk and popular music of the Holocaust period. There's a pointer, or maybe I can just use this thing. This is one Yiddish book that has not been scanned and not freely available online, but you can glance at the cover. This anthology is significant both because of its scope. It's huge, 435 pages, 233 songs and poems, and the fact that its compiler, Shmerke Kaczerginski, songwriter and folklorist who survived World War II as a partisan fighter, was himself a major contributor to the repertoire, and was, as I've said, among the first to document and collect these songs. Yet until relatively recently, these contributions have been mostly overlooked by historians of the period. Rather, I should say, especially in this place, overlooked by the generation of researchers that followed the first cohort of survivors and their contemporaries who established the discipline of Holocaust historiography in Yiddish soon after the end of the war. Kaczerginski stood as a heroic figure to that first generation, and it's gratifying to see his seminal contributions to Shoah folklore, literature, and music studies increasingly acknowledged, even in dissertations, and his story becoming better known to the general public. So we'll turn to that story. Shmerke, short for Shmeryahu Kaczerginski, was born in 1908 in Vilna, Ivo's hometown, perhaps a landsman of, or we know a landsman of some here today. He was born poor. His parents died during the First World War, worn out from years of privation. He was raised by relatives and educated at city Talmud Torah, a school for impoverished children. In his teens, he apprenticed as a printer and lithographer, a vocation he chose because he'd fallen in love with the printed word, and because he saw that access to a printing press might serve his growing passion for radical politics. The American historian Lucy Davidovich got to know Kaczerginski in the late 1930s while she was a student in Vilna. She described him in her memoir, From That Place and Time, quoting from that now. He was barely taller than I, and though I later learned he was then 30 years old, he looked like a teenager. Behind his big, round, black-rimmed glasses, you could see that he was slightly cross-eyed. He had a high forehead and a snub nose. He was shabbily dressed, but that didn't inhibit his boisterous sociability. Genial and good-natured, he was also rough and tough, ready with his fists. He'd grown up in a harsh and brutal world where he learned to protect himself. He was known to have taken on anti-Semites spoiling for a fight. Today, we'd call him street smart. His occasional verses were like folk songs, some sentimental, others bristling with leftist militancy. Some had been set to music and were sung in Vilna. He was all sociability and gregariousness. His greatest talent was organizing things, meetings, art exhibits, excursions, parties. Let's see. That picture on the left would be from about the time of Davidovich's visit, and later he's as a kind of a stylized warrior after his partisan unit liberated Vilna. But I won't get too far ahead of the story. During the 1920s and 30s, when Vilna was part of the Polish Republic, Kaczerginski joined the influential literary group Young Vilna, whose members would also include the poet Avram Sutzkever, soon a close friend and future comrade. By then a committed communist, Kaczerginski had also built up a reputation as a firebrand and the author, as Davidovich noted, of popular militant pro-Bolshevist songs. Inevitably, his subversive writings and advocacy of social revolution led to police beatings, arrests, and prison time. One of his friends reported that he organized the inmates of Vilna's central jail into a theatrical company, anticipating, as we'll see, activists he'd pursue later on and to a similar purpose in the ghetto. We have time to hear him sing a few verses from his best-known revolutionary song. It's a matter of finding it and clicking it, right?
Nicht kommen heim zurück, wird der schöne Stiebel nicht kommen heim zurück. Sie ist die Mama euch weg in Gas verkäufen Nepo, die Mama euch weg verkäufen Nepo, stehen in Kirch vor Josem Teddy Teller mit dem Tepo, stehen in Kirch vor Josem Teddy Teller mit dem Tepo. Es wird nicht sein kein Wetschere, sagt Chanele die Jaten, es wird nicht sein kein Wetschere, sagt Chanele die Jaten, sie ist die Mama ich weg mit am Helfen dem Taten, sie ist die Mama ich weg mit am Helfen dem Taten. Plötzlich Trachapule ist rein in kleinem Stiebel, plötzlich Trachapule ist rein in kleinem Stiebel, vorbeigeflogen Chanelen, gemacht in Wandagrebel, Chanelen gemacht in Wandagrebel. Oi, Base ist Schlimmele, Kinder kommt mit mir. Oi, Base ist Schlimmele, Kinder kommt mit mir. Motten nimm die große Korb, mehr ke die Tier. Motten nimm die große Korb, mehr ke die Tier. Die Schufloden von Kamot mit an alte Fass. Die Schufloden von Kamot mit an alte Fass. A Barrikade stell mir auf mit dem Gas. A Barrikade stell mir.
Thank you. Sorry about that. You are going to hear more of this same piece, Barrikaden, when the Schaichters take the stage later on, so I don't want to preempt that. Under the terms of the Soviet-German pact, Vilna became the Lithuanian capital after Poland fell to German armies in September 1939. Less than 2 years later, Nazi Germany turned on its Soviet ally and invaded the Baltic states, stepping up in the process its campaign to eradicate European Jewry. In Vilna and environs, as in all newly conquered Eastern territories, Jews not murdered outright were forced into ghettos or sent to labor camps. For a time, Kaczerginski posed as a deaf mute to evade the roundups. His Polish wasn't good enough to allow him to pass for a non-Jew. So he wandered the streets with a sign and a tin cup begging food from the locals, slithering through 100 hells, as his friend Schaechter later put it, before he voluntarily entered the ghetto in early 1942. Once there, he returned to form and figured prominently in the ghetto's cultural life, organizing theatrical productions, literary evenings, and educational programs. Many lyrics he wrote at the time, notably Frühling, Springtime, Stiller, Stiller, became instant ghetto favorites, as did the anthem he created for the Ghetto Youth Club, Jugendhymn. The three pieces I just mentioned are also on the Schaichters playlist, so we'll stay tuned for them. In one of his memoirs, Kaczerginski reflected on the creation and spread of music in such a bizarre environment as the ghetto. In ordinary times, he wrote, each song would probably have traveled a long road to popularity. But in the ghetto, we observed a marvelous phenomenon, individual works transformed into folklore before our eyes. And later, looking back, he was awestruck by the creativity and dedication of artists, himself included, trapped behind ghetto walls. Again, I'll quote from Kaczerginski. It seems unnatural when in a moment of high tragedy, an actor on stage suddenly breaks into song. You'd think this does not happen in real life. But real life has shown us otherwise. On the day the partisans of Vilna ghetto mobilized to defend their commander, Itzhak Wittenberg, though I knew my final hour was fast approaching, I continued to write in my diary. And when we partisans stood on the barricades, the Gestapo blasting away Sutzkever, Opeskin, Hirschglick, and other armed authors kept on scribbling their creative work. We can now hear a sample of the ghetto's instant folklore. I just mentioned this piece. It's called Jugendhymn, or Hymn of Youth, written in 1943 for the ghetto's youth club. It became immediately popular and soon spread beyond Vilna to other ghettos. It's still remembered, it's still sung today. Will be sung today. We'll hear two interpretations. The first introduced and then, the first one will be introduced and then sung by the author himself. Did that wrong. It's hard to find.
Jugendhymnen, gewidmet die Kinder von Jugendklub in Vilner Ghetto. Shmerke Kaczerginski, Musik Bret Werb, gesungen von Schaechter. Unser Lied ist voll mit Treue, dreist ist unser Untergang. Trotz der Säune wacht beim Teuer, stur und Jugend mit Gesang. Jung ist jeder, wer es will noch. Wir haben kein Partei, Alte kennen euch sein Kinder und eine neue, freie Zeit.
Okay, we'll now hear a contemporary or more contemporary interpretation, if the 60s can be considered contemporary. For some of us, it is. We'll hear it in Hebrew translation, and to show how the piece continued to make its way in the world many years after the end of the war. As mentioned, we'll hear an interpretation, which I happened to catch a bit of in rehearsal, for the current century in the recital that follows. In March 1942, representatives of Einsatzstab Rosenberg, an official Nazi agency for the confiscation of Jewish cultural property, arrived in Vilna, tasked with the mission to carry off the city's treasured collections of rare books and Judaica. From among the ghetto intelligentsia, the Germans assembled a team to identify and select the most valuable items for shipment to the self-styled Institute for the Investigation of the Jewish Question in Frankfurt. As for those volumes not selected, Kaczerginski lamented tens of thousands of books, many, many unique editions from Venice, Salonika, Amsterdam, Prague, Krakow, Vilna, would be hauled off to the paper crematorium. So this team, which included, among others, Kaczerginski and Sutzkever, launched an audacious rescue operation, smuggling cultural artifacts from Rosenberg headquarters in the so-called Aryan side of Vilna, past armed sentries and into the ghetto. Kaczerginski later acknowledged that many felt this band of smugglers, facetiously dubbed the Paper Brigade, had lost its collective mind. They looked at us as if we were lunatics, he wrote. They were smuggling foodstuffs into the ghetto and their clothing and boots. We were smuggling books, pieces of paper, occasionally a Sefer Torah or mezuzahs. In fact, Rosenberg headquarters also served as a rendezvous point for arms merchants and members of the United Partisan Organization, in Yiddish, Vereinigte Partisane Organisatie, or FPO, the Vilna Ghetto Underground Militia, which also counted Kaczerginski in its ranks. Here are three members of the Paper Brigade. The woman sandwiched between the two poets is the Vilna-born educator Rochel Pupko-Krinsky. During those anxious months of sorting and smuggling, Kaczerginski continued writing new songs, including one dedicated to the courageous Mrs. Krinsky. He saw his role of troubadour and folk poet in practical terms and claimed he only wrote when existing repertoire lacked the right song for a given situation. As he explained, not everyone was suited for that simple but important type of handiwork. Kaczerginski suspected as well that his songs of heroes and martyrs of everyday life and death might one day serve to document the history he was witnessing firsthand. And the credibility and evocative power of some of these lyrics would in fact be recognized at the opening of the Eichmann trial in 1961, when the Israeli Attorney General, Hausner, read the words to one of Kaczerginski's songs into the court record. Attorney General explained that his own words could not adequately convey the dreadful acts he was called upon to describe. And again, we'll soon hear this very song, Stiller, Stiller, in live performance about the killing field Ponar. Following an unsuccessful uprising in September 1943, Kaczerginski and his unit broke out of the ghetto. He spent the remaining months of the war in the forests of Lithuania and Belarus, serving first with the Jewish partisans, later with the Soviet brigade. It was in his capacity as a brigade historian that he began noting down the stories and songs of his partisan comrades. Dating from this time, his ballad Itzik Wittenberg valorizes and memorializes the Wittenberg affair, a particularly dramatic chapter in the history of Vilna during the occupation. Itzik Wittenberg, the leader of the Jewish underground, had been arrested by the authorities, then freed by his partisan comrades. When the Germans threatened to do away with the entire ghetto if he wasn't handed back, Wittenberg chose to surrender himself to the Gestapo, knowing this meant certain death, torture and death. I can cue up the song. Oh, you know, I wanted to show this image. This is an image found in Soviet Heinland, where they were retelling the Wittenberg story. We don't have any real images of Wittenberg, so I just wanted to show that. Okay.
Der geht's verteilt, der Feind wie a Chaie, der Mauser erwacht in mein Hand. Dort Lutzem Gestapo, es 4 Tage schmitten, durch Finsternis dem Kommandant. Dort Lutzem Gestapo, es 4 Tage schmitten, durch Finsternis dem Kommandant. Die Nacht hat mit Blitzen das Ghetto zerrissen, Gefahr schreit a teuer avant. Haver im Getreie von Ketten befreien, verschwinden mit dem Kommandant. Haver im Getreie von Ketten befreien, verschwinden mit dem Kommandant. Die Nacht ist verflogen, der Teut fahrt die Augen, das Ghetto, es fiebert in Brand. In das Ghetto, es droht die Gestapo, heut oder dem Kommandant. In das Ghetto, es droht die Gestapo, heut oder dem Kommandant. Gesagt hat dann Itzik und durch wie a Blitzis, ich will nicht, ihr sollt zu lieb mir. Darfen das Leben dem Säune abgeben, zum Teut geht stolz der Kommandier. Darfen das Leben dem Säune abgeben, zum Teut geht stolz der Kommandier. Liegt wieder verteilt, der Feind wie a Chaie, wachst wieder mein Mauser in Hand. Jetzt bist mir teuer, sei du mein Befreier, sei du jetzt mein Kommandant. Jetzt bist mir teuer, sei du mein Befreier, sei du jetzt mein Kommandant.
In August 1944, Kaczerginski participated in the liberation of his hometown and soon again set to work salvaging books, artworks, and other cultural artifacts members of the paper brigade had concealed from the Germans. A portion of this material went on display in the Vilna Museum of Jewish Art and Culture he and Sutzkever set up in their shared apartment until Soviet authorities shut it down. I guess there's an image of some of these artifacts. Disillusioned with the newly reinstated Soviet-Lithuanian regime, Kaczerginski left for Poland. He settled briefly in Łódź, where he met and married Mary Schutan, a native of Svincion, Lithuania, who had spent the war years as a hospital nurse in Tashkent. But the Kielce pogrom of 1946 soon compelled another move. this time to Paris, which was quickly becoming the cultural magnet for stateless Jewish artists, activists, and intellectuals. To give a nice picture of his home life in Paris. From his new base, with financial support from the American Joint Distribution Committee, Kaczerginski launched himself on a tour of occupied Germany, lecturing to survivors in displaced persons camps, gathering new material, and stopping to record several of his own songs onto phonograph discs for the archives of the Jewish Historical Commission in Munich. In case you can't make out this fuzzy newsprint, this announcement in the Yiddish press, DP Press, provided details of Kaczerginski's speaking and song collecting tour through the American zone of occupied Germany. He visited 17 different camps over a 19-day period in November 1947. My tongue is perspiring. Like most Jewish DPs, Kaczerginski was eager to leave Europe behind. He seriously considered Israel, but in 1950 finally chose to settle in Buenos Aires, Argentina. And he wrote incessantly during this period, publishing works in Warsaw, New York, Paris, Buenos Aires, and in occupied Germany. Some of the music heard today first appeared in Kaczerginski's earlier all-Vilna songbook, the Song of the Vilna Ghetto, das Gesang von Vilna Ghetto. We're looking at the cover. Apart from songs and poetry, the book contains some impressive typography and a set of original drawings by a Vilna-born, Bauhaus-trained artist-illustrator, Moshe Behelfer. In Argentina, Kaczerginski kept up a hectic schedule of writing and lecturing about ghetto life, guerrilla warfare, the Soviet situation, and tirelessly campaigning on behalf of Jewish culture. He also continued to supply songs as needed, now on post-war concerns such as Zionism and illegal immigration, as well as a charming song for his daughter, Libela, born a few years earlier in Paris. And he traveled frequently to speaking engagements throughout North and South America. He crisscrossed the USA from New York to Hollywood, and wrote home that his favorite American city of all was... Anybody here from Detroit? We'll now hear some later Kaczerginski, a topical song, a tango he wrote in Paris in response to then current events. It's called Es wird geschehen, it will happen, dedicated to the martyrs of the refugee ship Exodus, sung by the author. I can never find that little thing here. Here it is.
Geschehen. Shmerke Kaczerginski, Musik Zygmunt Berland,
There's a bit of a dropout.
gewidmet dem Maapilim von Exodus. Frei schwimmen Schiff,
Comes back.
die Masten flattern zum Blau. Nur ich mit mein Ohren Mammen, behalten muss ich auf den Ohr. Die Schiff muss in Ärger antrinnen, soll uns keiner nicht gefinnen. O Stuhl im Wind, oder bring mein Kind dich zum Breg dem Gegarten. Genug schon gewahrt. Es wird geschehen. Und wir alle werden wieder sein zusammen. Ihr werden, euch unser Schiff wird schwimmen frei auf alle Jammen. Unser heiliger Verlangen, zu kehren sich im Land von den Nevim, wird mir Kuyen werden herrschen in die Gesangen, wie man wünscht uns Bruch im Habaim. Der Nazi und stupt uns vertrieben, wir müssen als bei ihm noch sein. Jesoimim mir seinen geblieben, o wer wird sich merachem sein? Land jedes Volk hat bekommen, Verwollte mir müssen stummen, O Brüder, sagt, wenn wird kommen der Tag und der Tag der Gegarter, genug Stein gewahrt, wird geschehen, es wird geschehen, und wir alle werden wieder sein zusammen, ihr werdet sehen, euch unser Schiff wird schwimmen frei auf alle Jammen, unser heiliger Verlangt, zu kehren sich im Land von den Wien, wird mir kuyen werden herrschen in die Gedanken, wie man wünscht uns Bruch im Habaim. Gebräust hat der Jamdampf und Zorn, mit verpeinigten Weg, doch seinen wir jünger geworden, wenn wir haben der Senden Brett, und Gott bin gewend an Armater, hab ihr sich die Aponte flattert, Shalom mir rufen, noch Bluten Kriegsschiffen, befallen euch Glied, men führt uns zurück, noch wird geschehen, es muss geschehen, und wir werden alle wieder sein zusammen. Ihr werdet sehen, euch unser Schiff wird schwimmen frei auf alle Jammen, unser heiliger Verlangt, zu kehren sich im Land von den Wien, wird mir kuyen werden herrschen in die Gesangen, wie man wünscht uns Bruch im Habaim.
I think I left out the composer credit. That melody is by Zygmunt Berland, a musician who survived the Warsaw Ghetto. Having lived through the war and its turbulent aftermath, Kaczerginski met his death during a return trip from an engagement in provincial Mendoza, Argentina. He had earlier and publicly renounced communism in favor of leftist Zionism, which spurred the local pro-Soviet faction to call for a boycott of his talk. Kaczerginski, the born tactician, outmaneuvered the boycotters by delivering his speech the day after it had been announced. Now anxious to return to his wife and child, he exchanged his train ticket for a plane ticket, and tragically the flight went down shortly after takeoff, killing all aboard. This was in April 1954, around Passover. He was then just 45 years old. News of the disaster spread quickly, and the dozens of telegrams and letters that reached the Kaczerginski home from every corner of the Yiddish-speaking world shared a tone of disbelief at the sudden, untimely end of this seemingly unstoppable figure. Almost 1 year after the tragedy, the tributes gathered in a memorial book, Ondenkbuch, printed in Buenos Aires, continued to register incredulity alongside sorrow. The novelist and one-time young Vilna member Chaim Grade foresaw in Kaczerginski's death the inescapable end of the old world Yiddish cultural community, already decimated and dispersed. Grade wrote, 10 months have now passed since Shmerke Kaczerginski left us, and everywhere I go, I meet him. He is not unaccompanied. He has with him every Vilna street and every young person of Vilna who gathered around him 20 years ago. He meets me and escorts me in the ruins of the Vilna ghetto of 10 years ago. He leads me past partisans in the forests, armed with rifles. He moves between high walls of books and sacred tomes gathered by his own hands from the ruined, butchered, and plundered Vilna ghetto. I see him directing a children's choir in Łódź. I see him lecturing at pioneer kibbutzim in every Polish city. I see myself with him, shoulder to shoulder, at the funeral of the victims of the Kielce pogrom. I see him singing in the DP camps of Germany. I see him consoling survivors in a poor kitchen in Paris. I see him trembling with excitement in the brightly lit halls of the Zionist Congress in Basel. Shmerke moves on, leading a sea of faces and eyes of thousands and thousands of Jews who heard him and loved him in Paris, in Israel, in every country in South America, and every city in North America. He lived his too short life in song, in brotherhood, uplift, creativity, struggle. He spoke and sang in the language of his impoverished Vilna street. He had the words, the melody, and the confidence of the people, and his songs likewise were folk songs. He was descended from the people, lived with the people, forgot himself in the people. He remained young in the ghetto, in the forests, in every mortal peril, in every disappointment. And when he, the personification of youth, was taken from us, the last spark of our own youth was extinguished. Now we, his friends, are old. I think there's a slide of them, not yet old, but friends. Shmerke Kaczerginski and Grade. On the 25th anniversary of Kaczerginski's death, Avram Sutzkever honored his friend's memory with the poem Mit Shmerken, wenn es brennen Wälder, with Shmerke while forests burn. The setting is a Lithuanian forest on a cold winter night. As a fire touched off by the enemy blazes through the woods, we see Chaver Shmerke, Comrade Shmerke as he was known, agile as a squirrel, scrambling up a tall tree, itself about to explode in flame. The poet explains his friend had scaled the flaming tree in order to take in, so as to better remember the devastated landscape. This is how Sutzkever concludes his poem. The fir tree trembles more than he, its needles already afire. The rings have burst inside its trunk, the fir tree has expired. What is my comrade doing up there, singing a folk-like strain? Forests are burning, tree trunks are burning, but their roots intact remain. I'm just about through, but since it's a well-worn tradition to wind down commemoration events with Hirsch Glick's partisan hymn, Zogny Kemal Zugest dem letzten Weg, and since Kaczerginski didn't write that one, we can conclude with a performance by Kaczerginski himself of his poetic tribute to Glick's iconic anthem, a hymn to a hymn, so to speak. It's called Unser Lied, our song, and each stanza reflects or makes a midrash on a line from Glick's inspiring lyrics. In a barely audible introduction, he announces that the musical setting is by the Israeli composer Nochem Nardi. The recording was made at the Hotel Marseille in New York City in 1948 at the request of the folklorist and Yivo Zamler Ben Stonehill.
Dem Verfasser zum Partner in ihr Lied und sein Lied so mit Kämmerer zu diesem letzten Weg. Die Musik hat geschrieben der Kompositor Nochem Nardi. So mit Kämmerer so geht dem letzten Weg, gesungen hat in Ghetto-Lager jeder Lied. So mit Kämmerer so geht dem letzten Weg, euch heint und morgen singen wir das Lied. O der Weg, rett uns führen zu der Frei. Mit dem Weg, kommen wir zum Morgen nach der Schnei. Dort wird spotten unser Gure, unser Mut, gesungen wird in Ghetto-Lager jeder Lied. Dort wird spotten unser Gure, unser Mut, euch heint und morgen singen wir das Lied. Unser Mut, wird der Zweifel mit vergiften mit sein Samen. Unser Mut, wird zerbräusen sich wie Qualet auf dem Jamm. Ja, Parol so ging das Lied von dort zu dort, gesungen hat in Ghetto-Lager jeder Lied. Ja, Parol so ging das Lied von dort zu dort, euch heint und morgen singen wir das Lied. A Parol, von den Nächten bis dem Heim und morgen auf der Freit. Der Parol, ruft in Wörter dreibläus an Israel Chai. Und von Lieden mit Naganes in die Hände, gesungen hat in Ghetto-Lager jeder Lied. Und wo noch Lieden mit Naganes in die Hände, mit sie zusammen singen wir das Lied. in die Hand, und das Lied, Väter bringen uns zum größten Herr und Sie.
And I think I will end it right here. Thank you for your attention. Please stand by for some live music.
Unser Chaver Bret verdient noch einmal, wir sollen bedanken. This too is resistance, bringing forward so that it becomes part of who we are. More importantly, that we take that enrichment and we add it to the enrichment of the life of our community. Yivo in itself, a child of Vilna, which will celebrate 100 years of existence next year. And the Nusakh Vilna program will mark that as well, is not just the repository, not just the archives that Steph labors over. It is the well, the source from which to drink, from which to nourish, and to resist by continuing an extraordinarily rich tradition. Agiv, for those of you who are Yiddish challenged, Yivo has an app for that, and a wonderful series of Yiddish programs and teachers. I see Perel Teitelbaum sitting in the front, who is among the most beloved of the teachers. But Yivo's Yiddish program has led to literally hundreds of devoted new creators, not just lovers, but creators in this medium that is our homeland, Yiddish. Es ist mein Covid, euch vorzustellen, die Unternehmer von unser Konzert. It's going to be my honor to present to you the participants in our concert. There is always a concert. Even in the most dire times, as you can see, it was the songs that encouraged. Agiv means, by the way. In the partisans, you could be a communist, you could be a Bundist, you could be a Zionist. You were a fighting, proud Jew. And you were fighting to keep that tradition alive. And that also is our Yerusha. Our singer this afternoon is Temma Schaechter. And I reminded Temma and Binyumen that I saw one of her debuts in 2008 in Paris at the Medem Bibliothèque, and it was then a small center. And she was moletam and molechein. She was just full of charm. Temma is now an accomplished singer and songwriter and actress, and she draws from multiple traditions, from Yiddish and from folk song and from jazz, and has appeared at multiple festivals, and most recently with the Philadelphia Philharmonic Choir at Carnegie Hall last May. And she will be accompanied by Binyumen Schaechter, who happens to be related. And Binyumen is a composer and conductor, an entertainer, not just in Yiddish, but in cabaret and in Broadway, and a writer and a singer and a lecturer and a workshop leader and an all-around very interesting guy. He's also the very well-known conductor of the Yiddish Philharmonic Orchestra. It used to be the Jewish People's Philharmonic Choir, not orchestra. And you can see much of the work that that choir has done on YouTube. So it's my Vergnügen, euch vorzustellen, Temma Schaechter und Binyumen Schaechter. Binyumen. Du bist doch nicht Temma. Und macht von mir ein Ligner.
Most of the songs you're about to hear, all with lyrics by Kaczerginski, were written during the Second World War and the Holocaust in the 1940s. The first song, Barrikaden, however, was written well before the war in Vilna in 1926.
Tatis mamis kinderlich boin Barrikaden. Auf die Gassen gehen Arbeiter und Triaden. Sis der Tate fri von Stube weg auf der Fabrik. Wird der scheunen Stiebel nicht kommen heim zurück. Nicht kommen heim zurück. Sie wissen gut, die Kinder der Tate wird nicht kommen. Es ist der Tate heint in Gas mit sein Bix vernommen. Mit sein Bix vernommen. Es ist die Mama euch weg in Gas verkäufen Äppel. Stehen in Kirch verjossente die Teller mit dem Teppel. Es wird nicht sein, kein Wetschere, sagt Chanele die Jaden, weil die Mama ist weg zu helfen dem Taten, weil die Mama ist weg zu helfen dem Taten. Oi, plötzlich trach Apollo ist an in kleinem Stiebel, vorbeigeflogen Chanelen, gemacht in Wand Agribo, gemacht in Wand Agribo. Oi, bei so sagt Chanele, Kinder kommt mit mir, Motje nimmt die größte Chor, mehr geht die Tier. Die Schiffloden von Kamod mit an alten Fass, a Barrikade stellen mir auf in mitten Gas. Die Barrikade aufgestellt in Stiebel, nicht doch keiner. Laufen Polizei vorbei, die Kinder warfen Steine. Die Kinder warfen Steine. Was mir, wenn mir wetschere, ist du nicht in Harmaden. Die Kinder lech von Stiebele helfen Mom in Taten. Kinder lech von Stiebele helfen Mom in Taten. Tatis Mamis kinderlich boin Barrikaden. Tatis Mamis kinderlich sie boin Barrikaden. Auf die Gassen gehen I bitte triaden. Auf die Gassen gehen I bitte triaden.
Some of these next songs that we're going to be introducing We will start by introducing them in Yiddish, and those Yiddish introductions are taken straight from the first published version, the first compilation of songs that was released after the war, where it was entirely in Yiddish. Everything in Yiddish will be translated. Der Text zum kimmendicken Lied ist umgeschrieben geworden noch ein Umkim von Mechabers Frau Barbara in April 1943. Der Kompositor von Lied, Avremel Brudno, ist gewesen ein bekannter Vilner Meloman, was ist ihm gebracht geworden in ein estonischen Lager.
The lyric to this song was written after Kaczerginski's wife, Barbara, perished in April 1943. The composer of the melody, Abraham Avremel Brudno, was a renowned Vilner meloman, musician and music lover who perished in an Estonian camp.
Ich plonge in Ghetto von Gessel zu Gessel und kenn nit gefinnen kein Ort. Nit da ist mein Liebe, wie trockt men a Riber Menschen, o sagt Gottsch'a Wort. Es leicht auf mein Heim jetzt der Himmel, der Bläue, wo hab ich jetzt davon? Ich steh wie ein Bettler, bei Witten teuer und bettel a bissele Sonn. Frühling nimmt zu mein Treuer und bring mein Liebsten, mein Treuen zurück. Auf deine Flügelbläue und nimm mein Herz mit und gib es ob mein Glück. Frühling, auf deine Flügelbläue und nimm mein Herz mit und gib es ob mein Glück. Ich geh zu der Arbeit, vorbei unser Stiebel, in Treue, der teuer vermacht. Der Tag hat zerhälter, die Blumen verwelkter, sie wianen, vor sie ist euch Nacht. Vor Nacht auf Zurückwegs, es neuet der Treue. O da hast du Liebste gewahrt. O da in dem Schotten noch kennt ich dann Trott ist, flext kuschen mich lieblich und zart. Frühling nimmt zu mein Treuer und bring mein Liebsten, mein Treuen zurück. Frühling, auf deine Flügelbläue und nimm mein Herz mit und gib es ob dein Glück. Frühling, auf deine Flügelbläue und nimm mein Herz mit und gib es ob mein Glück. Es ist Jahr der Frühling, gar früh ungekommen. Zerblüht hat sich Bank schafft noch dir. Ich seh dich, wie jetzt der bei Laden mit Blumen, a Friedeke, gehst du zu mir. Die Sonne hat vergossen dem Garten mit Strahlen, zersprotzt hat die Erde sich in Grün. Mein Treue, mein Liebste, wo bist du verfallen. Du gehst nicht heraus von mein Sinn. Frühling, nimm zu mein Treuer und bring mein Liebsten, mein Treuen zurück. Frühling, auf deine Flügel bläue und nimm mein Herz mit und gib es ob mein Glück. Frühling, auf deine Flügel bläue und nimm mein Herz mit und gib es ob mein Glück.
Geschrieben in der Partisanenbrigade, in Namen von Voroshilov, in die weißrussische Länder arum Narod.
This lyric was written while serving in the Voroshilov Brigade in the Belarusian forest around Narod.
Von die Ghettos twisse Wend in die Welt der Freie, anstatt Keten auf die Hand, halt der Bix an Naiem, auf die Aufgabe ist mein Freund, kusch mir Hals und Achsel, mitten Bix, ich bin nicht von Heint, fest und aufgewachsen, auf die Aufgabe ist mein Freund, kusch mir Hals und Achsel, mitten Bix, ich bin nicht von Heint, fest und aufgewachsen. Wenig seinen Meeren soll, dreiste wie Millionen, reißen mir auf Berg und Tal, Brecken Eschalonen. Der Faschist verzettet wird, weiß nicht wovon wann, Stürmen wie von unter Erd, jeden Partisane. Der Faschist verzettet wird, weiß nicht wovon wann, Stürmen wie von unter Erd, jeden Partisane. Das Wort ne komme hat da Sinn, wenn mit Blut verschreibst ihm, vor dem heiligen Bagin, finden mir die Streiten, nein, wir werden keinmal sein, letzte Mohikane, es bringt der Nacht die Sonnenschein, der jeder Partisane, nein, wir werden keinmal sein, letzte Mohikane, es bringt der Nacht die Sonnenschein, der jeder Partisaner.
Zu dem musikalischen Konkurs in April 1943, was der Jidenrat, die Verwaltung von Vilner Ghetto, hat ausgerufen, hat der 11-jährige Sohn von Dr. Nusakh Volkowiski, Alexander, zugestellt seine Komposition, zu welcher Kaczerginski hat laut dem Vorschlag von der Lehrerin Rochel Pupko-Krinsky angeschrieben dem Text.
For a music competition in April 1943 that the Jewish Council of the Vilna Ghetto held, the 11-year-old son of Dr. Nusakh Volkowiski, Alexander, composed the melody, to which Kaczerginski, as encouraged by the teacher Rochel Pupko-Krinsky, wrote the lyric. Der Kompositors Tate ist dennoch ermordet geworden in Estland. Nur allein hat übergelebt am Churben und sich ausgelebtes Leben in Medinas Israel.
The composer's father was then murdered in Estonia, but he himself survived the Holocaust and lived out his life as a composer in Israel.
Stille, stille, lass mir schweigen, Quorum wachsen da. Es haben sie verpflanzt die Sonne, grünen sie zum Blau. Es führen Wegen zu Ponar zu, es wird kein Weg zurück. Ist der Tate wo verschwunden und mit ihm das Glück. Stiller Kind meins, wein nit oizer, es helf nit kein Gewein. Unser Unglück werden Sonnen sei wie nit verstehn. Es haben Brege solch die Jammen, es haben Twisse solche zusammen. Nur zu unser Pein kein bissel Schein, kein bissel Schein. Frühling auf dem Land gekommen und uns Herbst gebracht. Ist der Tag heint voll mit Blumen, uns seit nur die Nacht. Goldig scheint der Herz auf Stammen, blüht in uns der Zar. Bleibt verjossemt wo am Mame, das Kind geht auf Honar. Wie die Vilje geschmiete, teuch gejocht in Pein, ziehen Kreis Eis durch Litte erst in Jammerein. Es fährt der Heuschig, wo zerrunnen, von der finster leichten Sonnen. Reiter, komm geschwind, dich ruft dein Kind, dich ruft dein Kind. Stille, stille, es qualden uns in Herz arum, bis der Teuer wird nicht fallen sein, wir müssen stumm. Frei nicht kind sich, sie ist dein Schmeichel, ist vor uns Verrat. Send dem Frühling soll der Säune wie in Herbst abblatt. Soll der Qual sich ruhig fließen, stiller sei und hoff. Mit der Freiheit kommt der Tate. Schlaf, Kind mein, schlaf. Wie die Vilje aber freite, wie die Bäume grün beneite. Leicht bald Freiheitslied auf dein Gesicht, auf dein Gesicht.
We have a special guest here to perform this next song with us. As many of you know, and as you heard introduced before, Temma was the younger half of the Schaechter, the Schaechter sisters, who traveled around the world giving Yiddish concerts for around a decade as children and teens. Well, the elder half of the duo, Reina Schaechter, is here with us today from California, and she's going to join us on stage for this next number.
The melody to this next song was written before World War II by Vilna composer Basia Rubin. She asked Kaczerginski to write lyrics to it at the time, but he was unable to. In the Vilna ghetto in 1943, Kaczerginski remembered the melody and then wrote the lyrics for the children of the ghetto.
The song was dedicated to the Children's and Youth Club in the Vilna ghetto. At all gatherings of the club, the chorus used to perform the hymn and the attendees stood up. The composer survived the war in Russia, where she was then a dentist in Vilna.
Unser Lied ist voll mit Treuer, dreist ist unser Muntergang. Chotsch der Säune wacht beim Teuer, stürmt Jugend mit Gesang. Jung ist jeder, wer es will, nur Jorden haben Kennbarkeit. Alte kennen euch sein Kinder von einer freier Zeit. Wer es wogelt auf Wegen, wer mit Dreistkeit stellt sein Fuß, bringt die Jugend sie entgegen von dem Ghetto a Geruss. Jung ist jeder, wer es will, nur Jorden haben Kennbarkeit. Alte kennen euch sein Kinder von einer freier Zeit. Wir gedenken alles von ihm, wir Dämonen, alle Freund. Ewig werden wir verbinden, unsere Nächten mit dem Heint. Jung ist jeder, wer es will, nur Jorden haben Kennbarkeit. Alte kennen euch sein Kinder von einer freier Zeit. Kleiben mir zu neuf die Glieder, wieder stollen mir die Reh. Geht a Bäuer, geht a Schmiede, lass mir alle gehen mit See. Jung ist jeder, wer es will, nur Jorden haben Kennbarkeit. Alte kennen euch sein Kinder von einer freier Zeit. Alte kennen euch sein Kinder von einer freier Zeit.
Schaechter.
This last Kaczerginski song that we're performing was written right after the Holocaust and expresses the eternal hope and longing for salvation.
Ungesäuert auf den Herzen macht men alle Chaim. Ob der Umit nicht ruhen, singen mir all Lied. Is nicht da kein bissl Bromfen, la mir trinken Mayim. Mayim Chaim ist doch Chaim, was darf noch der Jid? So schön kommen die Geule, so schön kommen die Geule, so schön kommen die Geule, Mashiach kommt schon bald, so schön kommen die Geule, soll schon kommen die Geule, soll schon kommen die Geule, Mashiach kommt schon bald. Es ist ein Dorf von Kolachaiv, seid nicht kein Aronim, und von Sündigen Mashiach Gicher kommen wird. Ach, du Tatel in Himmel, spenden B'nai Rachmanim. Sei Mashiach soll nicht kommen, a bissel zu spät. Oi, soll schon kommen die Geule, soll schon kommen die Geule, soll schon kommen die Geule, Mashiach kommt schon bald. Oi, soll schon kommen die Geule, soll schon kommen die Geule, soll schon kommen die Geule, Mashiach kommt schon bald. Es tanzen Bäume in die Wälder, Sterne auf den Himmel. Reb Yisrael, der Machuden, dreht sich in der Mitte. Es wird sich häufigen Mashiach von sein tiefen Tremor, wenn wird der Herr unser zwillettige Lied. Oi, oi, soll schon kommen die Geule, soll schon kommen die Geule, soll schon kommen die Geule, Mashiach kommt schon bald. Oi, soll schon kommen die Geule, soll schon kommen die Geule, Mashiach kommt schon bald. Oi, 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 oi,
Let's make sure that the Messiah doesn't come just a little bit too late. Ich will wieder bedanken, die Verwendung sich beteiligt. I want to thank those who took part, our newfound friend Bret Werb, for an exceptionally learned and instructive talk on Shmerke Kaczerginski. Die Schaechter Temma, Vilna, der Schaechter Tate, the others, alle Frauen, die das zusammengestellte Programm, Alex that put together the program. Technicians, I'm sorry I don't remember your names, but thank you because without you none of this work. Wir beschließen, Freitag ist doch heute schon, will ich allen Menschen ein gut, gesund, freudig Jahr und Shalom, Shalom, Shalom. For Rosh Hashanah, we wish you all a good, healthy, joyous year, and Shalom, Shalom, Shalom. We always close these programs with the singing of the hymn of the partisans, Zobnik Kemo. The words are in the page before last, so that everybody can join us, even if you don't read Yiddish, it's in transliteration. Those who are able, please rise. There is a keynote, an Aufnahme, there is a reception directly following this program. We hope to see you all. Wir hoffen, alle zu sehen, über ein Jahr gesund und freudig, eine schönere und eine bessere und eine erschauliche Welt.
Sag nicht keinmal, als du gehst den letzten Weg. Gott Himmeln bleien, versterben bleie Tag. Komm in Bett noch unser ausgebänkte Schau. Es wird abheugt an unser Trott, wir seien da. Komm in Bett noch unser ausgebänkte Schau. Es wird abheugt an unser Trott, wir seien da. Von grünem Palmenland bis weißem Land von Schnee. Wir kommen an mit unser Pein, mit unser Weh. Und wo gefallen dieser Spritz von unser Blut? Sprotzen wird dort unser Gwure, unser Mut. Und wo gefallen dieser Spritz von unser Blut? Sprotzen wird dort unser Gwure, unser Mut. Es wird die Morgensonne begilden uns dem Heind und der Nächten wird verschwinden mit dem Feind. Nur heut beisammen wird die Sonne und dem Kajor wie a Parol, so ging das Lied von dort zu dort. Nur heut beisammen wird die Sonne und dem Kajor wie a Parol, so ging das Lied von dort zu dort. Das Lied geschrieben ist mit Blut und nicht mit Blei. Du nicht kein Liedl von a Vogel auf der Frei. Das hat a Volk zwischen Faden dick gewähnt. Das Lied gesungen mit na Garnis in die Hand. Das hat a Volk zwischen Faden dick gewähnt. Das Lied gesungen mit na Garnis in die Hand. Da sag nicht keinmal, als du gehst im letzten Weg. Gott Himmeln bleien, versterben bleie Tag. Komm in Bett noch unser ausgebänkte Schau. Es wird abheugt an unser Trott, wir seien da. Komm in Bett noch unser ausgebänkte Schau. Es wird abheugt an unser Trott, wir seien